and continue our search into major worldviews. I'm going to take real advantages here. I want you to know that there are 8 billion worldviews currently in use on this planet. And I'm going to have the gall to divide them into 3 gargantuan gross amalgams. These 3 gargantuan gross amalgams of worldview will roughly include the vast majority of humanity. It may not apply to certain real exotic worldviews. It may not apply to cases of aberrant psychology and mental illness. We won't call those part of the general population in regards to this, but mostly whoever you know, whoever you are, your thinking, your understanding, your perception, and your processing of your experience of life will generally fall into one of these 3 categories. And the first one I'm going to offer you is philosophical naturalism, which is very prevalent today in our culture. Has been for the last 300 years. Came about probably the advent of the 17th century, 1650, and we will study this in detail. But for now, it's enough to know that philosophical naturalism, the primary belief is that matter is all there is. Material is all there is. You know, I'm going to give you a key to a real important code here. See the ISM on the end of naturalism? That's a code. Ism is something that is attached to the end of something that is basically serving as a substitute for God. Now, not necessarily that it is worshipped, but it is something that is used as a platform for explaining all things. Just for fun, we're talking about materialism. What is the substitute for God here? Matter. Yeah. Let's say Spiritism. What's the substitute for God? It's not rocket science, you know, spirits. Communism. Common ownership of all things. I'll put commonality. How about rationalism? That's kind of a trick question. By rational, we mean reason. So what is the substitute for God here? Human reason. Reasonism, if you want. I'll do one more just for fun, because I like doing this. What about naturalism? Yeah, nature. Just whatever is. Oh, and one more I might as well, just because I can. It'll make things clearer. Empiricism. What have you heard empirical associated with? Yeah. It's kind of a curveball. What empirical means is experiential. So this is substituting our experience through senses, through life experience, through touch, through taste, through feel, the things we can measure, the things we can weigh, the things we can dissect, which is where its association with science comes. But it's really, when you see empiricism, it means experiencism. So ism is just a real shorthand for you to know that that's humanism. Bada boom. Josh?
As I was reading through, I got into some of this drug culture, a lot of these philosophical ideas that were linked with drug use.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same as experience?
This leads us down a very strange path because it gets close to existentialism, which is an exchange of my personal interior reality for God, which in its really logical conclusion becomes Nietzsche's nihilism, which means basically annihilation of anything except me. So I have no bounds. I don't recognize any external authority. I don't recognize the need to deal with other individuals. I can just do what I want. Joe?
Is it a leap to say that these are like a form of like idolatry?
Not formally. I'm taking a shortcut here. This is one of those things where a guy that doesn't like philosophy is chewing up, and I'm trying to give you sort of the practical rubber meets the road reality. A scholar would argue for the more formal explanation requiring 6 pages of an encyclopedia. But basically, an empiricist is going to judge and process everything based on his personal experience, including scientific. A rationalist is going to base everything on his own ability to reason things out. And the rest, same. So in effect, we can get away with this as a shorthand. I wouldn't try to write a doctorate on this.
No, but like I guess what I'm thinking is like these are all like good things, and we experience these things. However, if they're elevated to like your worldview instead of God, they become like a block. And become some form of
This is why scientism is not the same thing as science. I love science, but scientism is scary. Because scientism, like materialism or naturalism, presupposes that there is no immaterial reality. And we're gonna look at that here immediately. Philosophical naturalism, it would hold under its umbrella materialism, empiricism, rationalism. All of these, the primary belief is that matter precedes mind. That you could say existence precedes essence. Matter is physical stuff. Like we say, it's rocks, it's sticks. Rocks and sticks eventually grow and morph and evolve into mind and soul and heart and will and intellect. But it starts as matter, as physical matter. Results finally in this evolving matter, just physical atoms, evolves into personality, relationships, values, community, faith. So, philosophical naturalism, all there is sticks and rocks. All there is are the things that you can tangibly experience. All of them, from the smallest to the biggest. The practical application here is stuff, matter, physical material. It's all there is. In essence, the universe is a big pool table. Nothing happens that is not reflected in the ideas of cause and effect. Nothing happens unless it's caused by something else. You know, just like the cue ball hits the 7 ball careens into the 6 ball, the 6 ball goes into the side pocket. Cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. One of the outcomes of this is something called determinism. It means everything is predetermined because it is run based on physical law. It's all cause and effect, which turns the universe into a giant, what? Machine. It's just a machine. That's all it can do. You know, if this lever comes down, it will stop this wheel, which will make this one over here spin and send the bearing over there. It happens every time, a million times in a row. It's a machine. Sadly, it has the other effect of turning us into machines. In essence, the belief that there is only physical matter in the universe, there is no immaterial matter, basically takes away any foundation for the belief that there is a legitimate internal reality. You know, your love for your spouse or your child is simply a residual echo of some electromagnetic exchange between covalence levels in a subatomic particle event. I mean, you experience it as love. You know, you think you're making choices. You think you have hope. You think you have faith. But all of those are just predetermined things that happen as a result of a chemical reaction. And you're just not recognizing them for what they are. You're under the illusion that you have a free will, that you make free choices, that you love somebody. This is a guy that really believes this, and a lot of them do, and they'll still acknowledge love, they'll still acknowledge virtue, but if you take philosophical naturalism all the way to the end, this is the outcome. If there's no immaterial, no dimension in which immaterial reality can occur, then what are our feelings and our thoughts and our beliefs? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you guys asked, because we're going to be dealing with that. That is the fundamental question of Western philosophy. It is what we're going to study for 6 or 7 weeks, is how we have perceived that and how it has changed through time. There are 2 views to philosophical naturalism. One is the atheist. The atheist is certain that God does not exist. He'd stake his life on it. I'm certain there is no God. A true atheist will attempt to prove that God does not exist and never has existed. Megan?
So is the machine eternal then? Is that how that?
Oh, I'm sure that there are varieties on a theme here. They know that at some point the Big Bang happened and that something was created. They're very uncomfortable with the implication that it came from nothing, so they don't know quite how to explain it. We're going to get there to a degree. Josh? Okay. There are traditional proofs for God's non-existence. One is the proof of evil, I get these great things on the internet. Time's up, flush all, save your kids from religion. Now, from religion, I'd almost agree. But as I like to tell people when they press me, when I'm talking about my faith, I really don't care very much about religion. I care about reality. I'm about what is real, whether you believe it or not. That seems important somewhere along the line. Well, the atheist will traditionally say that the preponderance of evil and suffering proves God doesn't exist, but as we're going to find, we're going to look at it and discover that one, it wasn't part of the original creation. It was secondary. It's temporary. We can actually point to Ezekiel 28 and see where it was birthed, and then Revelation 20 and see where it goes away forever. 3, it's our fault. It's not God's fault. Okay, well, Satan started it, but we jumped on and got the first franchise that was available on the corner of 8th and Broadway. We saw a good thing when we knew it. The other thing is God entered into this with us voluntarily in order to bail us out of a hole we had dug and could not get out of, not in a gazillion years. And the last one, which I always get pushback on, but we'll explain it when we come to it, our suffering here isn't as bad as we think it is. We're like 3-year-olds, getting a vaccine. It's the end of the world. Whining, screaming, crying. Well, no, it's actually saving you from polio, smallpox, and diphtheria. But we don't know that. Our experience is limited. We're going to get deep into this later on in the semester. I want to lay a foundation of philosophical development first, however. So evil. They would also say that purposelessness, the universe is purposeless. Well, that's sort of a circular argument because in the big 4 questions, if God does exist, if we can show that he does, then there are purposes you have no idea of. So let's postpone that objection. One is the randomness of the universe. Well, frankly, the universe only seems random. The whole study and discovery of genetic science and DNA in the last 50 years has almost upturned this completely. It's not random. It is so finely tuned that increasingly even secular scientists are saying, I don't know how we can explain this. The odds of this just coincidentally coming into existence is overwhelming. It just couldn't happen that way. Well, the last one is the first law of thermodynamics, which you are familiar with in the form of energy cannot be created or destroyed. Newly restated as energy is conserved, the actual amount of energy existing in the universe is constant. But this still fails to address the relatively recent discovery of what we call the Big Bang, or the virgin birth of the universe. The ex nihilo, coming from nothing existence of all time, matter, space, existence. Well, an atheist he's going to go down fighting. I am certain there is no God. A little different than what the agnostic does. The agnostic would say, well, there's just not enough proof. I'd like to believe in God, it's really nice and everything, but there's just not enough proof. Well, it takes shelter in skepticism instead of being conclusive about God's non-existence. Agnosticism actually offers the same arguments for and against God, though it's lacking not only an examination of the evidence, these guys have not done their homework, it actually lacks any real sense of conviction. It's like an agnostic is sort of a wimpy wannabe atheist. I mean, here you go. Okay, even more to the point? I mean, what's not to love, right? As long as I don't have to do what he says. Well, so much for philosophical naturalism. Let's look at another large family. Organic Spiritism. The universe is alive and it is very spiritual. Well, at least we have the recognition that there is an immaterial reality of some sort. We have a couple. Why don't you guys keep handy this little puppy right now? Instead of spending 2 years in graduate school digesting all that these things mean, this will help you understand a little bit. Pantheism, in organic spiritism, pantheism is the belief that God is the universe. That's him. Everything you see, everything you do, everything you experience, touch, taste, sense, it's him or her, but it. The Mandalorian. Okay, pantheism. This is what you and I are familiar with, theism, in which God is completely separate from his creation, the universe. I mean, he's vastly superior to it, infinitely more expansive than it. He is transcendent in the infinite, in the extreme. This is pantheism. There is no difference. Do you like how I blended the blue and the yellow to get green? Okay. Okay, those of you who giggled, you got 5 extra credit points. I just want you to know, okay? All right. Pantheism, there is no distinction between God and the universe. By implication, there's no distinction between us and the universe, or us and God. It's all just one big melting pot. And that works. This is actually, these are 1, 2, 3. These, 1 is mind is all there is, and we're a part of it. 2, there's no distinction between God and the universe. 3, this is simple materialism. It's disguised as spirituality, but it requires nothing. It's practical atheism. Now, the next one is a little odd. It's panentheism. Oh, there's the mind is all there is. No distinction between God and the universe. Panentheism is God wears the universe, like a pair of overalls. He's in it, but he's separate from it, but he's in it. And he grows with it. He is contained inside the universe. That means he's actually a prisoner of time, just as you and I are. The implication here, he can't see what's coming. But, I mean, he's so creative and so powerful, that if something jerks the steering wheel, he instantly, deals with it and fixes it. But he is a fellow traveler. He just goes with us and discovers things as they go along. He doesn't know how it's going to turn out. Kelly?
So do you not think that God is the most powerful? Like, it sounds like the universe has more power than God then. So.
Well, that would be a legitimate implication, yes. I think they get away with it by always speaking as if God is the transcendent, all-powerful thing. They define him as simply existing within the universe in which you and I live.
So did he create the universe?
I think, you know what? Hard to say. Each of these breaks into enough different sects that I think some sects would be different in their explanation for the original cosmology, but basically they would agree that the universe is so big that God is inside of it with us, rather than being separate from his creation, although transcendent over all of it. Brittany?
I was just going to kind of tap on what she was saying, but the best way that I can describe it is like, with that view, it's like God is like this superhero, and the universe does whatever it wants. God always saves the day. God is powerful, but it never really exalts from where he should be, which is above that, which is separate from his creation.
I would agree with that. It's a great description. He is a little bit like Superman, or Thor, whoever your personal favorite is. But number one, God is contained inside time. He doesn't know the future. That's a big part of this. God, number two, guides and steers the present by his creative power and divine reflexes. 3, this in theology, in terms of formal theology, this is known as open theism or process theology. Both of those are kind of on the outs. They have not survived a detailed inquiry by the evangelical community of theologians. Too many problems with it. Okay, well, they're not done. We've got pantheism, panentheism. We also have my personal favorite, polytheism, which simply means many gods. Now, the Hindus have probably been the most efficient with this. They have 300 million gods. I think they must do business with Costco. I don't believe any Hindu shaman or priest actually knows even a fraction of the gods. They just, for different vocations and regions of the country, they'll know, several hundred that they have to pray to, but not all of them. But you can get it reduced too. I mean, you can get down to the Egyptians had a limited number of gods. I forget. I want to say something like 30, if I remember correctly, Joe?
Don't most, even within like the Hindu belief, have like higher reigning gods? Like there's a few like main ones or Greek
Right.
ones.
Yeah. Amun-Ra here, he's the big dog, but he's not transcendent. As we see also with Mount Olympus. You know, Zeus calls the shots, but Hera is always going behind his back, and his sons are just, it's like Peyton Place, man. It's just, they've got schemes upon schemes upon schemes. So he's not omniscient. He's not omnipotent, which is a big problem for polytheism. Nobody's in charge. You have one God that basically everybody acknowledges to a degree, but he's not that different. And they're all of them based on human avatars. Basically, they all resemble us, sadly, in their sinful brokenness. There are none of them that are all good. Oh, Lordy. Read Margaret Hamilton and any of those guys. Oh, yeah, Valhalla, here we go. Same. The number of gods will differ, but each one has a different function, and that, as we're going to see when we study the development of philosophy in the beginning, in the post-diluvian, after the flood development of the human race, this was kind of the default system. If you had forgotten about God, if nobody faithfully carried the knowledge of God descending from Noah, it was easy to believe in this. It made sense, and it gave you some coherence. You know, the volcano explodes. Oh gosh, Vulcan is at it again. We better sacrifice those virgins and get him off our back. Our poor cosmology. But this, again, it's the same thing. Polytheism, many finite gods inhabit and influence the universe, and even if one is at the top of the pecking order, he's still just one of the guys. The next subfamily of organic spiritism is animism. Oh, we have polytheism again, okay. Animism is the belief that everything has a spirit. Rocks, trees, animals, plants, everything. This was a dominant worldview in Aboriginal Africa, Native American, and pre-Christian Celtic cultures. And again, it's not like it doesn't make sense. It's actually kind of cool, Talk to my pet rock, I talk to my cats all the time. There's likely some communication going on there. One of the things that has added to the confusion, the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, and it is applied equally to the animal kingdom as it is to the human kingdom. So maybe they don't mean exactly the same thing by nephesh that we mean as soul, but that's how it's translated. So it's just an interesting thing. But it did involve the recognition that there was something inside. There was an anima, which is Latin for spirit, soul. So animism is still alive in Aboriginal cultures. We see it kind of in different places. Then I want to take us to the last portion of the organic spiritistic family. Oh, I do want to point out Pocahontas, who actually was a Christian. She married John Smith and came to Christ, and then drowned, sadly. But of course, when Walt Disney does it, we celebrate her animistic. That's my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, a Druidic priest. Those guys were pretty spooky. And Avatar, the movie that just came out. Awesome movie. Gosh. We bought our HD 4K TV just to watch Avatar, okay? But it's the same thing. The planet itself is alive. That all the little bugs and dandelion things and the trees and the wolves and the elephants, everything has a spirit. Okay, in the absence of any real revelation of God the Creator, it's not like this is out of left field. It makes a certain amount of sense. But we do get into occultism, which is a different fish altogether. It is still organic material, or organic spiritism, but the signature is that not only is the supernatural world is real, it can be manipulated to our advantage. Think you'll see that on a test? It is the sine qua non. It is the thing without which it doesn't exist. The signature of the occult is that I can find a spirit ally or a spell or a talisman or a rock or a charm, anything. I can find something that will open the portals to the other dimension and allow me to manipulate spiritual realities to advantage me and benefit me here on earth. The scary thing about this is the come-on for a lot of the spiritistic sects, cults. They kind of seduce you with the idea that, well, you know, you can actually have some power over these things. And they make it sound really good. The most innocent sounding in our culture is Wicca. Basically, it's just an old European term for necromancer, you know, a dealer in the dead. That's the pretty version, that's the not so pretty version. But it's a medium that calls up spirits. Remember the Witch of Endor that Saul goes after to call up the spirit of Samuel? That's her. Now, sadly, historically, in all truth, full disclosure, sometimes our biblical fervor and zeal in the Middle Ages grew so intense that we would take the poor old lady in the village that simply knew the different herbs to treat sickness with, and she became the witch and got burned at the stake. Okay, it wasn't every day, but we did the same thing with the Jews very often. History's not always a pleasant look through the family album, but it does contain really important lessons for us all. So, excuse me, Wicca is the pre-Christian European form of alliance with supernatural elements. And very often it was the herbalist lady in the village. But it was somebody who was trying to access the spiritual dimension in order to gain an advantage. Now, it takes a little bit nastier flavor as we get into shamanism. Oh, I do want to share that, you know, in the last 30, 40 years, Wicca has been cleansed in our culture. You guys remember Bewitched? How can you not love Samantha? Come on. And if you didn't love her, I guarantee you're going to love Jeannie. It's just, you know, how innocent. They only use it for good. Yeah, like that's going to happen. Well, I don't know. All you got to do is go down to, Ashland, wander around the park, and you'll probably be hit up by some very friendly people that just want to know if you want to come attend the meeting this evening. So it's very popular. It's, do what thou wilt, just don't harm anybody else, but you can, I won't even encourage you to dig too deep into that. Shamanism is more malevolent. It's first seen in prehistoric African forms, actually translated, came over with the slave trade and took root in the Caribbean primarily. Are you guys aware that the island of Haiti, upon achieving independence, actually devoted itself to Satan? Yeah. If you go down there on mission, you'll get an eye-opener. You'll get an eye-opener. So we have the African shaman. He was like a spiritual warlord. He was like a spiritual godfather. He did do healing, but also people came to him when they were cheated or robbed, or they had a beef with the tribe next door, and that was his job, is to do things. This evolved very quickly into voodoo, which is still alive in the South and in the Caribbean. We call it psychosomatic, meaning that it originates in the mind. But when you become aware that someone can be killed by having a curse put on them, and they learn of the curse, their cardiovascular system will shut down, or their immune response system will simply disintegrate. You can argue, okay, well, that's still physical. That's all happening in their mind. Well, okay, they're dead. So, this, whatever you like, the outcomes of this are real in the physical world. Is there a spiritual dimension to this? From my experience, after almost 70 years, I would say there is. Very interesting that when you go on mission, what you discover, it's very easy to dismiss the reality of the spiritual dimensions here because we're surrounded by human infrastructure, paraphernalia. One of my stories is before I came to Christ, I was a registered nurse in intensive care. And I remember having a lady who had this huge mass, I mean, the size of a cantaloupe, and she was dying in intensive care. And her church group came in and prayed for her. And I'm rolling my eyes, and the doctor's rolling his eyes. Yeah, whatever. Just let the religious folks do their thing. And then we took her in for radiology the next morning, and it was gone. Okie dokie. And I'm asking the X-ray doctor, the radiologist. I'm asking, Doc, what happened there? How are you going to explain that? Are you going to bring that to the committee? And he said, no. I'm just going to put spontaneous remission on her chart. And back it goes in the chart, back it goes in the medical records. It's easy in this environment to do that with manifestations of spiritual reality. It's easy to hide them. Like UFO reports, why bother? They seem to disappear. But if you allow yourself to get into an environment where you don't have all of the physical, material, human reinforcement of the philosophical, natural worldview, you're going to be hard-pressed to explain some of the things that you encounter. In Haiti, I would say out of 1 out of 10, it's more like on your 7 and 8 scale. Joe?
I didn't experience it firsthand, but when I went to Ghana, shamanism is still alive.
Oh boy.
And the shamans there, think their face is white. They're very distinct. You know who they are.
Oh, buddy,
And
yeah.
you steer clear of them.
Yeah. Same thing in Haiti. Everybody knows where the witch doctor lives, and you don't even go half a mile near his compound. Sarah?
And things like Wicca and Voodoo also, I've noticed, I'm in a youth center all the time. It's extremely popular and interesting to the young people.
Oh, yeah.
They see it on social media is so different than what it is. And it's becoming widely more popular all of the time. And I constantly have teenagers coming to me with questions about it because social media makes it look so different than what it is.
Here's a reality. You'll probably get tired of hearing me say this, and social media is a big part of it. You live in a planet where the vast majority of human beings involved and alive today are spending zillions of dollars and moving all of the resources of their combined cultures and nature and national trade and international trade in the direction of disproving and undercutting the reality of spiritual dimensions, of faith, of the existence of God, of the reality of Christ. That there are some that are conscious that they're doing that. I think the majority aren't really conscious that they're doing that. I'm not a big believer in conspiracies. I've got enough experience working with intelligence in the military to know if you have more than 6 or 7 people, you won't have a conspiracy long. Somebody will spill their guts and get scared, or they'll be bribed by a reporter or seduced by a spy. No conspiracies last that long. However, if I'm not a big believer in human conspiracies, I'm a real believer in spiritual conspiracies. Because there's one guy who is smart enough to run this. And he is smart enough to maneuver the operations and thoughts and actions of 100,000, 100 million people. And that's our enemy. So conspiracy, yeah. I don't think it takes the form that we find it in and presented in social media I'm sorry, we're too stupid, we're too weak. If Bill Gates really was going to invent an impossible technology of nanobots and stick them in his vaccine, well, you have to ask yourself, what would it take? One, he'd have to have 10,000 uber genius employees to develop this, install it, manufacturers to cooperate, and all of them willing to die rather than divulge the truth. I don't know, guys. Maybe I've been around too long, but I don't bet on an inside straight anymore. When I'm playing poker, it's the odds. It's the odds. Is it possible? Yeah. I've never seen anything even remotely like it. Even today, some of the things going on, I keep asking my friends, well, you know, evidence? Okay, I'm sorry. Don't go home and tell people that I tried to whip you up politically. I'm not trying to do that. I want you to trust Jesus Christ. I want your life to be founded in the unassailable reliability and authority of the Word of God. If you do that, you're going to be okay. You can make a lot of mistakes. You can have a lot of stupid thoughts. I mean, you can come to a lot of wrong conclusions and assumptions in your worldview, and you'll still be okay. Romans 14 says, you know, don't question the servant of another, you know, whether he stands or not. The one that belongs to the Lord will make him stand. It doesn't count on your strength. It's in who you have your faith. Boy, just whatever I say, whatever crackpot notions I share with you, please read the subtext. That was the subtext. It's Christ and it's the Word of God. End of story. And I got a Mount Everest of evidence to back that up. Not enough for you to march into some court and win your case, but enough to alert you to the fact that if you have the energy and the interest, man, you're going to find out the world's lying through its pazoo. And you don't have to take it. Gosh, 25 years as a pastor will ruin you, you know? Okay. Shamanism, again, we get into it, but it's every place. From the slave trade, the Indians had this to a certain degree already, the Native Americans, but it did ramp up with the arrival of the Spaniards and the close connection with the Spanish colonial civilizations that included slaves and the Native Americans. Anybody ever read the old Carlos Castaneda's books about the Yaqui Indian sorcerer Don Juan, the ingestion of peyote, which is now perfectly legal in our state? Although, isn't our Sudafed still illegal, Isla? Okay, yeah. Well, you can get in a lot of trouble with Sudafed. Come on now, don't laugh. Oh my. Well, what we get, shamanism is particularly dangerous because it just gets worse and worse. It's more and more power. And the spirit world cooperates with this. There are demons, my friends. And maybe they'll just tickle you with a little Ouija board action or something like that, or a little tarot, and they'll make it sound really good. And things will actually happen. And you'll be thinking, whoa, this is kind of cool. No, it's not. Because every offer they give you to be your ally, to be your helper, I mean, that's how the sex trade and trafficking work, is the innocent young children get groomed and toyed and drawn into a situation where they depend on someone that appears to be their advocate, their helper. And then when it's too late, the door slams shut and you're stuck. Yeah, a lot of personal testimonies we could give, but I'll spare you for now. That largely is the organic spiritism, the occult. The only one I'd share after that is just the New Age stuff. Dionne Warwick, Shirley MacLaine, crystals, pyramids. Again, this type, the New Age type, is heavily into talismans, a lot of the Eastern cultic practices, charms, all kinds of helps to help you learn. But it's very popular in our culture. About the only benefit I can think of is at least you can get a rather than a modernist philosophical naturalist, you can get a postmodern spiritist, and they at least will be willing to discuss with you the realities of the spiritual dimension. So they actually do believe in it. So at least you don't have to have that argument with them. Well, the last one is actually pretty easy. This is about monotheism. Oh, nice picture, huh? Where occultism ends. I promise not to forget my notes next time. Hey, you know what? If any of you guys want copies as the semester goes on, if you want copies of all the PowerPoints we use to look at the pictures a little more closely with your instructor notes, please feel free. Bring me a thumb drive and I'll stick it on there. It's not that many gigs. Monotheism. Oh, sorry for the nakedness part. Monotheism, this is the one we looked at before. You could use this one too. Theologically, either one of these is okay, as long as you understand that God is vast and separate from his creation. The creation is just this little, it's like a little electromagnetic radioisotope bottle that he has created. That's why it can contain both good and evil, because by his power, he has allowed that. If he stopped thinking about it for 1 minute and just let go, do you know what happened to our universe? Well, all the evil would instantly be evaporated. What would happen to us? We're gone. Except that we are hidden in Christ. That's all that would keep us going. So monotheism, this is really interesting because we have Judaism, 3000 BC. We get little bits of it. 2000 BC, the revelation to Abraham is actually kicks off the creation by God of a nation. Instead of just, individuals like Adam and Eve and Enoch. He had individual relationships before this. But now he has chosen to build from Abraham's faith a nation to himself. Judaism would say there is only one God, Yahweh. YHWH is the tetragrammaton. Number two, he is immanent, means he's right there in your face. He hears you. He's with you. He can speak to you. And he is transcendent. He's larger than the universe, not subject to the universe. He is both closely intimate and infinitely all-powerful. The Jews were right. They knew God. Number three, he has communicated effectively through and to humanity. And four, he has made a covenant with humanity through actually both Abraham and Moses. The Abrahamic covenant is still actually in effect today through Christ. It is by faith. Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. The Mosaic covenant was sort of a special experiment with the Jews. There's nobody tougher, nobody smarter, nobody more stubborn, nobody more stiff-necked. If they can't keep the law, you and I have no chance. And that was the purpose, was to show even these people, my chosen people, they couldn't even do it. Only by faith is this going to get done. Well, then 2,000 years later, along comes Christianity from 30 AD to present. Yahweh, number one, has himself revealed himself through his Son, Jesus. The Son has always existed. The triune Godhead in three persons has always existed. Otherwise, how would God have known what love is? But he knew, existing with two other persons, the Son exists with two other persons, the Spirit exists with two other persons, the Father exists with two other persons, and they love each other. And the impetus for creation comes from the desire to spread that, to multiply it. Let's make people like ourselves in our image. And it works. Jesus Christ, number 2, is the fulfillment of the old covenant with Israel. It's why we don't worry about Moses anymore. He is also the initiator of a new covenant with all of humanity through the sacrifice of his sinless life and resurrection. There is a distinct continuity between the Old Testament and the New Testament. As evangelicals, as theologians, we argue about the nature of it, the extent of it sometimes. You know, how many Old Testament laws do we need to worry about? That's fair. You know, don't get mad at anybody. But it makes for good discussion. We should do those things. God said, let's reason together. But the fact is, it's still by faith. Well, after 632 years after Christianity, we have another player in the game. The archangel Gabriel comes down and gives to the prophet Muhammad many revelations, 570 to 632, that he assembles in the Quran. Basically, and again, in church history, we probably do a better job of examining all of this. One day it's my dream to do a comparative religion class here at PBC. We'll see how that goes. But Islam, in a nutshell, is a radical legalism that focuses on the external behavior of the believer. And Allah is not a personal God. He is transcendent. He is omnipotent. He is omniscient. But he does not talk to us. He does not, you can pray, but there's no relational exchange. Even Muhammad did not know for certain whether or not he was going to paradise. And the initial, number 3, the initial invitation to Jews and Christians when Muhammad was kind of fishing a little bit to get everybody on board the new religion, the Jews and the Christians turned him down, and so he got a new set of revelations which abrogated the religion of peace that we read about in the Quran sometimes today, and inserted all of the new sword surahs, the ones. So instead of living in peace with your brothers, the Jews and the Christians, now when you meet an infidel on the crossroads, you should kill him. We call that's part of the Hadith doctrine of nasikh, abrogation, in which the second revelation nullifies the first revelation. It's unfortunate, and most people have no idea about that. They still find the cuddly, warm, fuzzy verses, and they say, see, Islam's not so bad. Oh, yeah, look at the outcomes. Sorry. There's also another one. This is kind of a weird one, guys. As we got closer, and the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason that devolved into the Enlightenment, got more and more developed, what we see is the advent of a much less passionate form of Christianity called Deism. Now, Deism, or I would call it finite Godism. Oh, let's see, yeah. Here's theism. Got God and universe, very close. Here is deism. This is not so much a separate religion. It's kind of a Christian mutation, and it even has similarities to Islam in that God ceases to be personal. He's incredibly transcendent. I mean, he's huge, he's powerful, he's the creator. He does all of those things. But he did such a good job creating the universe, he was able to quit. He checked out, moved to the Bahamas, kicked back in his Adirondack with a cool drink. He no longer deals with the human race. He doesn't answer prayers. He doesn't interfere in the affairs of humanity. Now, sadly, because it works so good, it's a Swiss watch. Sadly, deism became the fashionable form of Christianity. Now, in all fairness, everybody was very tired of 200 or 300 years of fighting and wars of the Reformation and the burning of people at the stake. I get it. But this just absolutely bleached Christian faith. If you want, this is Thomas Jefferson actually cutting all of the references to miracles and the supernatural out of his Bible. He admired Jesus, but he said, no, the miraculous, that's just silly, you know. This was actually the predominant faith among our founding fathers. A lot of interesting things came about in the 1700s. We're going to see this later. The American Revolution, 1776, 1778, that's the first time people actually started talking about the earth being millions of years old, with no real evidence for that. It just became the explanation. But most of these guys, good guys, they're referencing God in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, but their view of him was a bit scanced. Now, there were some good evangelicals. I think George Washington was one. You know, after you send 250,000 people to their death, you actually, like Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, you might be a nominal Christian going in, but that kind of holds your feet to the fire to examine things a little more deeply. And if you read Washington's writings on his later life, it becomes evident there's something deeper going on. I think John Adams and Sam Adams also were evangelical Christians. Kelly?
Do you feel like salvation is a little tricky for people with Deism? Like it's not
Yeah,
it can get kind of shady?
I do. Boy, it's such a matter of the heart. You know, there will be, I think on the day of rapture, there will be deists still here, and there'll be a few deists in heaven. I even met an old lady that was Jehovah's Witness that I swear, she loved Jesus. I think she's going to be there. I'm compelled by my faith not to fellowship with her, because the implication is that I'm endorsing her view, and I wouldn't give 2 cents for her elders. But I think it's okay to do that, to acknowledge that he holds us responsible for our convictions. And we have to honor some of the boundaries that those convictions entail in terms of fellowship, in terms of being yoked unequally. But the fact is, boy, you need to know, you have no idea who's saved and who isn't. We never do, which is why we preach to everybody. We share our faith with everybody. Even though we know some are chosen, some are not, there's no way to know. Only the Spirit knows. So hey, spill it. Get some on everybody. Then the guys that need it will put it to good use. Once it's out of your mouth and endorsed by your heart and your spirit, it's a Spirit's job. And the responsibility is the person that just heard you say it. And it may take them 10 years. It took me 10 years. You know, there were people planting seeds in me for a long time before I finally got to a point in my life where I realized, oh my gosh, that's what that guy was talking about. And I made the mistake of asking for light. Yep. And sure enough, I got what I asked for. Yeah, he's a deist that asks for light. He's going to make it. And the one that doesn't, Ben Franklin's not going to make it. Doggone it. Not unless he had a last minute, really interesting experience, because I really like him. Tom Jefferson, I don't think we'll see. So we'll see. This flourished in 1600, 1800. And today, many modernists, people who actually espouse a philosophical naturalism, they will verbalize a belief in a sort of a deistic understanding of God. You know, they'll pledge allegiance to the flag, they'll get married into church. Because here's another interesting distinction that we'll encounter many times. There are people who, as we're considering what we mean by evangelical, you know, because we get represented in the media a lot, especially now. There are people who self-identify as evangelicals. It means they wear their little thing and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm born again Christian. Hell, I was born in Indiana. What do you think? Dang." Okay, that's not what makes you a born again Christian. There are also people who are biblically compliant Christians. You identify them not by their self-identification, but by their behavior. That group is quite a bit quieter and less apt to set fire to things. Sadly, the quiet, compliant Christians tend to get lumped in with the loud self-identifiers. It's okay, God's in charge. All things are going to work for good. Whatever happens in the days to come will be okay. It will be good for us. Like I said, we do real well when we're not advantaged. We tend to remember why we've placed our faith in Jesus. And you know what, guys? That's always a good exercise. The more we do that, and we're going to do it a lot, the better off I think we'll be. Let's close right now. Any questions? Last minute questions? Okay. Father, we thank you. Oh, I think we're probably going to be getting into some kind of adventure here, Lord, but we trust you utterly, both to guide us and to provide for us and to protect us. Just from anger and hatred, misunderstanding, fear, Lord, as well as physical agents, gosh, COVID, anything, a flu. Lord, our lives are in your hands, and we are delighted that is so. And when you decide to lift us from these vehicles of flesh, I think we're going to be very happy to stand before you. Please encourage us and strengthen us. Grant us peace of heart and clarity of mind. And allow us, whatever happens, whatever our level of understanding and learning, that what we reflect to the people who speak to us is a good answer for the hope and the faith that is in us. We love you, and we ask that you would be with us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, guys, if anybody is even remotely interested in asking about switching over to the hybrid class, why don't you hang out for a few minutes, and we'll have helps. Have any big questions, again, hang out if you'd like to, or email or text me. Other than that, I'll post some of these things on Populi, and we will see you next week, okay? God bless you.